Billionaire secretly watched the maid's toddler feeding his baby. Then, he did something no one expected. The Harrington estate sat on 12 acres of manicured silence in Greenwich, Connecticut, the kind of silence that costs more per square foot than most people earn in a lifetime. Iron gates. Marble floors so polished you could see your own uncertainty reflected back at you. 7 bedrooms for sitting rooms, a wine cellar that hadn't been touched since the funeral, and a nursery at the end of the East Wing hallway that glowed pale yellow at all hours of the night because Ethan Harrington would not, let his son sleep in the dark. Ethan was 33 years old and had built 2 technology companies from nothing, sold the second one for $470 million, and appeared on the cover of Forbes before he turned 30. He had the jaw of a man who never lost arguments and the eyes of a man who had recently lost everything that mattered. His wife, Camille, had died 11 weeks ago. Postpartum complications that came without warning, without mercy, without any of the negotiation that Ethan's money had always been able to arrange. She had held their son, Noah, for 6 hours. Then she was gone. And now Ethan moved through his enormous house like a ship that had lost both its anchor and its compass, still massive, still impressive from a distance, but utterly adrift. Noah was 11 weeks old and perfect in the way that newborns are perfect, which is to say completely helpless and heartbreakingly beautiful. He had Camille's mouth and Ethan's dark hair, and a cry that could shatter the carefully constructed composure Ethan spent all day trying to maintain. The estate had a night nurse, a pediatrician on call, and a household staff of 8. Ethan had money. He had resources. What he did not have was any idea how to be a father without Camille standing beside him, translating the language of their child's needs into something he could understand and act upon. It was into this particular silence, heavy, expensive, grieving, that Sophia Reyes arrived on a Tuesday morning in October, her references impeccable and her resume neat, her 3-year-old daughter Marisol riding on her hip because the babysitter had canceled and Sophia had driven 40 minutes to this interview and she was not, under any circumstances, going home without at least trying. The estate manager, a brisk woman named Patricia, had looked at Marisol with the particular expression of someone confronting an unexpected variable in an otherwise calculated equation. But Sophia had looked at Patricia with the calm, unwavering steadiness of a woman who had been confronting unexpected variables for 3 years without anyone to help her carry the weight, and something in that steadiness must have communicated itself, because Patricia had sighed and waved them both inside. Sophia was 28 years old and had the kind of quiet beauty that doesn't announce itself, dark eyes that paid careful attention to everything, hands that were always doing something useful, a voice that was low and unhurried even when her heart was racing. She had come to the United States from Guadalajara at 19, following an aunt who promised opportunity and delivered exactly that, though not in any form Sophia had imagined. She had worked her way through community college while cleaning houses. She had earned a certificate in early childhood development. She had married a man named Rodrigo who was charming in the beginning and cruel by the end, and she had left him 18 months ago with Marisol in one arm and a duffel bag in the other, and she had not looked back even once because looking back had never fed her daughter or paid her rent. She needed this position. The salary was extraordinary. The live-in arrangement came with a small suite of rooms off the kitchen wing, which meant she could keep Marisol close and save on rent and finally, exhale. She sat in the interview room with Marisol balanced on her knee, answering Patricia's questions with precision and care, while Marisol, who was 3 and therefore governed by impulses that existed entirely outside the realm of social convention, swiveled her head around and studied every corner of the room with the focused intensity of a scientist cataloging a new species. "She's very observant," Patricia said, in the tone of someone who could not decide if this was a problem. "She notices everything," Sophia said, and there was unmistakable pride in it. "She always has." Ethan Harrington did not attend the interview. He was, according to Patricia, working from home, a phrase that in this house meant he was stationed at the desk in a study, in the clothes he had slept in, with 3 monitors open and a cold cup of coffee at his elbow, doing the only thing he currently knew how to do, which was work, because work had a logic to it and a cause and effect that grief stubbornly refused to provide. He did not emerge when Sophia arrived. He did not emerge when Patricia gave her a tour of the household. He appeared for approximately 45 seconds in the kitchen doorway when Patricia brought Sophia through to show her the suite, and he looked at Sophia the way a man looks at something that is real but that he cannot fully process. A quick, exhausted inventory of her presence, a nod that was barely a nod, and then he was gone again, back down the hallway toward his study, his footsteps quiet on the marble. Sophia watched him go. She noticed the shadows under his eyes and the tension across his shoulders and the particular way he held himself, like a man braced for impact at all times. She had seen grief before. She knew what it looked like when it moved through a body. She said nothing about it, because it was not her place to say anything, and because Sophia understood instinctively that some things need time before they can be spoken aloud. She got the job. She moved in on a Thursday. Marisol brought her stuffed elephant, whose name was Elefante, and a small backpack printed with sunflowers, and she walked through the marble foyer of the Harrington estate with the absolute confidence of a 3-year-old who has not yet learned to be intimidated by wealth or square footage. She patted the marble floor with one small palm, looked up at Sophia, and announced, cold, with the gravity of a formal observation. "Yes, baby," Sophia said softly. "Cold floors. We make it warm?" Marisol asked. Sophia looked around at the enormous, beautiful, hollow house. At the vase of fresh flowers no one had ordered, but that arrived every Monday from some automated florist account. At the family photograph on the entryway table, Ethan and Camille, laughing at something outside the frame, her head tilted back, his hand at her waist, that had accumulated a thin layer of dust because no one on staff had dared move it. "We'll try," she told her daughter. "That's all we can do. We'll try." Down the East Wing hallway, past 2 closed doors and a linen closet, in the pale yellow glow of the nursery nightlight, Noah Harrington made a small sound in his sleep. Not a cry, not distress, just a sound, as if he were dreaming about something warm. As if some part of him, too small and new to name it, already knew that something had shifted in the cold, enormous house. As if something, against all odds, was about to begin. The first week passed in careful, measured distances. Sophia learned the rhythms of the Harrington household the way she learned every household, methodically, respectfully, with the quiet attentiveness that had always been her greatest professional asset. She learned that Noah took his first bottle at 5:30 in the morning and his last at 10 at night. She learned that he preferred to be held slightly upright after feeding and that he startled at sudden sounds, but calmed almost immediately if you pressed your hand flat against his back and held still. She learned that Ethan moved through the house on a circuit, studied to kitchen to nursery and back, and that he slept in 3-hour intervals at most, and that he took his coffee black and his meals standing at the kitchen counter, because sitting down at the table, the actual dining table where there had once been 2 chairs pulled close together, was apparently still something he could not manage. She learned these things and she kept them, folding them into the careful inventory she maintained of everyone in her care, because caring for people, really caring, not just performing the tasks of care, had always required this kind of attention. You had to know a person's patterns before you could understand their needs. You had to see them clearly before you could help them without making them feel helpless. Marisol operated under no such methodical constraints. Marisol was 3. She had her mother's eyes and her father's impulsiveness, and a personality that was entirely, thunderously her own. She had opinions about everything: the color of her cup, the order in which her books should be arranged, the precise temperature of her oatmeal, the injustice of bedtime. She spoke in full sentences that sometimes contained words from 2 languages simultaneously, and she asked questions with the relentless frequency of someone who genuinely believed that every answer would lead to something wonderful. She had been living in the small suite off the kitchen wing for 6 days when she decided, with the sovereign certainty available only to toddlers and absolute monarchs, that she was going to explore. Sophia was changing Noah's sheets when it happened. She had brought Noah with her in his little bouncer, setting him on the nursery floor where she could see him while she worked, and she had left the door open, a habit, because Marisol was always supposed to stay in the suite during work hours, but always supposed to, and Marisol existed in a state of perpetual negotiation. The hallway was long and the marble was, as Marisol had correctly identified on the first day, cold. It was also, from a 3-year-old's perspective, magnificently interesting. There were doors with shiny handles. There was a large painting of a horse that warranted serious examination. There was a table with a bowl of decorative stones that felt absolutely extraordinary between small fingers. Marisol made her way down the hall with the systematic thoroughness of an explorer, and she arrived at the nursery doorway at precisely the moment that Noah, in his bouncer on the floor, opened his eyes and looked at her. They regarded each other. Noah was 11 weeks old, and his vision was still developing, but he could see shapes and movement and the warm tones of a face, and what he saw was Marisol, small, round-cheeked, utterly still for perhaps the first time all morning, crouching down to his level with her hands on her knees and her head tilted the way her mother's tilted when she was paying very close attention. "Hi, baby," Marisol whispered. Noah blinked. His tiny hands opened and closed. "I'm Marisol," she said, still whispering, with the gravity of a formal introduction. "That's my mama." She pointed at Sophia, who had gone completely still at the linen drawer, watching. "She takes care of you. So, I take care of you too." She nodded once, as if ratifying a contract. "Okay."
Noah made a small sound.
His mouth moved. Marisol's face broke into a smile, so large it seemed to take up more space than a 3-year-old's face should reasonably contain.
"He said okay, Mama," she announced.
Sophia laughed despite herself, softly, covering her mouth. "Did he?" "He said okay." Marisol sat cross-legged on the floor in front of the bouncer, Elefante the stuffed elephant placed carefully beside her as if she had brought back up. She reached out one small finger and touched Noah's hand, the lightest possible touch, the way Sophia had taught her. Always gentle, always gentle. Babies are like flowers, and Noah's fingers wrapped around it with that involuntary, ancient grip that newborns have, the grip that feels like a question and an answer at the same time. Marisol froze. Her eyes went wide. Then they filled. "Mama," she breathed. "He held me." "He held you," Sophia said softly, her own throat tightening. "Yes, baby. He did." What happened over the following days was not something Sophia orchestrated or encouraged beyond the careful supervision it required. It was simply what happened when a 3-year-old who had enormous love to give met a baby who had enormous need to receive it, in a house that had been running critically low on both. Marisol appointed herself Noah's companion during the morning floor time that Sophia incorporated into his routine. She brought him things, the soft blocks, a board book she could not read but narrated from the pictures with impressive invention, Elefante, who was deemed important enough to share. She talked to him in the constant, flowing, bilingual stream of her consciousness, and Noah tracked the sound of her voice with his eyes in a way that he tracked very little else. He was calmer when she was near. Sophia noticed it clinically at first because she was a professional and she noticed things clinically. Noah's startled response was less pronounced. His stretches of contentment were longer. When he fussed, Marisol's voice, not loud, not shushing, just present and warm and entirely unfazed by the crying, seemed to reach something in him that even Sophia's practice techniques sometimes struggled to reach. She mentioned it carefully to the pediatrician during a home visit, framing it as an observation rather than a conclusion, and the pediatrician, who had been quietly worried about Noah's elevated cortisol indicators, said that consistent warm social contact in the early weeks was one of the most powerful developmental tools available and asked if they could keep whatever was working. They could keep it. What no one told Sophia, what she was not watching for because she was watching Noah, was that Ethan was watching too. His study was at the end of the hall, but the hallway carried sound in this house the way old houses do, as though the walls themselves were listening. He had heard Marisol's introduction. He had heard, "He hold me, mama." He had heard his son's rare, clear laugh, the one that came from somewhere deeper than reflex, floating down the corridor at 10:15 on a Wednesday morning, and he had stood up from his desk without planning to stand up, and he had walked to the doorway of his study, and he had stood there in the shadow where the hallway light didn't reach, and he had looked. Marisol was showing Noah a picture in a board book. She was pointing at a lion and saying, with complete authority, "That's a dog." She was completely wrong and completely certain, and Noah was watching her face with absolute attention, his small body oriented toward her like a plant toward sunlight. Sophia sat nearby, folding a blanket, glancing up every few seconds with the habitual vigilance of a mother who never fully stops watching.
It was such an ordinary scene.
It was the most ordinary scene in the world. Ethan stood in the shadow of his study doorway for 4 minutes. He counted them later, when he was back at his desk trying to remember what he had been working on, because 4 minutes was the longest he had stood still without working or sleeping or tending to Noah since the morning Camille died. 4 minutes of just watching, just breathing. Something in his chest doing something he couldn't name and was slightly afraid to examine. He went back to his desk. He opened his spreadsheet. He stared at numbers that meant nothing for a long time. Down the hall, Marisol told Noah, "Now I show you the elephant. He nice, like elefante." And Noah laughed again. And Ethan Harrington, 33 years old, Forbes cover, for $170 million, pressed the heel of his hand against his sternum like a man who has just realized his chest still works. It was a Sunday, which distinguished itself from the other days of the week primarily by its silence. The household staff had rotating schedules and Sundays ran a skeleton crew, which meant the estate was quieter than usual, and quiet in that house had a particular quality. It wasn't peaceful, it was loaded, like a sentence that has been started and never finished. Sophia was up at 5.
She was always up at 5.
She fed Noah his first bottle of the morning, sitting in the nursery rocking chair with a nightlight still on and the rest of the house still dark, and she thought about the grocery order and Marisol's upcoming 3-year checkup and whether she should ask Patricia about taking Tuesday afternoon as her scheduled personal time. Practical things. The scaffolding of a life. Noah finished his bottle and refused to sleep. He was having more of these alert periods now, longer stretches of wakeful curiosity that the pediatrician said were completely normal and developmentally wonderful, and that practically speaking meant that Sophia was often engineering entertainment for a 3-month-old at 6 in the morning. She put him in his bouncer and she sang to him, softly, the same songs she had sung to Marisol, the songs her own mother had sung in Guadalajara, and Noah watched her face with his serious, dark eyes and waved his fists in the approximate rhythm of her singing, and this, she had found, could sustain them both for a surprisingly long time. She did not hear Ethan until he was in the doorway. He appeared the way he sometimes did, suddenly, quietly, as if he had materialized rather than walked, and Sophia startled enough that her song cut off, and she started to rise from the chair with the automatic posture adjustment of an employee surprised by their employer at 6 in the morning, but Ethan put up a hand.
"Don't," he said. "Please."
And there was something in the word, not the authority she was accustomed to hearing from him, not the clipped efficiency of a man who moved through his own house like he was running a meeting, but something rougher and more unguarded, that made her still. He crossed to Noah's bouncer and crouched down, the way he sometimes did in these early morning hours when he thought no one was watching, and he touched Noah's cheek with one finger. Noah turned toward the touch immediately, and something flickered across Ethan's face that Sophia had learned to recognize over the past weeks, the compound emotion of a man who is devastatingly in love with his son and devastatingly afraid of getting it wrong. "He's been awake since 5, Sophia said softly, filling the silence with something practical, something that didn't require him to perform more than he could manage. I know. I heard him. Ethan was quiet for a moment. I always hear him.
She believed that.
She had seen the light under his study door at every hour she'd been awake, which was most of them. She had found cold coffee cups on the nursery dresser that she hadn't placed there. He moved through the night like a man patrolling something he was terrified to lose.
He's eating well, she said.
Gaining weight. Dr. Mercer was pleased on Thursday. I know. He paused. Thank you for being here for that. Of course. Another silence. Different from the silences before it, softer at the edges somehow. Noah grabbed Ethan's finger in his grip, and Ethan made a sound that was almost a laugh, involuntary and helpless, the kind of sound that happens before your defenses can organize themselves against it. He's strong, Ethan said. He's very strong, Sophia agreed. Ethan didn't rise from his crouch. He stayed there, at Noah's level, and Sophia watched him find the thing he found every time he managed to be still with his son. The specific gravity of it, the way it pulled him out of his spinning thoughts and into the simple, absolute present of a small person who needed nothing from him but presence. Your daughter, he said after a while. Sophia waited. She's good with him. He seemed to be choosing words carefully, like someone crossing a frozen lake and testing each step. I've noticed. He responds to her. She loves him, Sophia said simply. She asked me yesterday if he was going to be her best friend. Something happened to Ethan's face. It happened quickly, and he controlled it quickly, in the way of someone practiced at controlling things quickly, but Sophia saw it. The crack in the composure, the instant of undefended feeling that flashed through before the walls came back up. She looked away, giving him the privacy of it, studying Noah's waving fists. What did you tell her? Ethan asked, and his voice was careful, controlled. But underneath the control, there was something that wanted to know the answer very much. I told her that friendships take time, Sophia said. That you have to be patient and kind and keep showing up. And then I told her she was already doing all of those things, so she was probably off to a good start. The silence this time was long enough that Sophia thought the conversation might be over. That he might stand up and leave the way he usually did, retreating back to the study, to the spreadsheets and the cold coffee and the managed distance he kept between himself and anything that threatened to require more feeling than he currently believed he could survive. But he didn't stand up. What he said was, I don't know what I'm doing. For words, and they cost him something. She could hear the cost of them in the flatness of his voice, the careful absence of inflection that people use when they are afraid that any variation in tone will split something open that they are not ready to have split open. Sophia looked at him steadily. No one does, she said. Not at first. She knew. It came out rougher than he intended. He cleared his throat. Camille knew. She always knew. She would have known what he needed, what he was trying to tell us she would have. He stopped. She sounds like she was remarkable, Sophia said softly. She was. His jaw worked. She was everything. And now I have him, and he's everything, and I am terrified every single day that I am going to fail him the way I failed her by not being. He stopped again. He pressed his eyes closed. When he opened them, he was looking at Noah with an expression of such naked, undefended love that Sophia felt like an intruder on something sacred. She thought of Marisol. She thought of the first months alone, the terror that had lived in her chest like something with claws, the certainty that she was not enough and would never be enough, and that her daughter deserved better than what Sophia could give her. She thought of how that terror had not gone away but had slowly transformed, under the weight of getting up every morning and doing it anyway, into something that looked almost like confidence. You're here, she said, at 6 a.m, crouching on the floor with him. You're here every night. You hear him when he wakes up and you come. She paused. That's not failing him. That's the whole thing, Mr. Harrington. That's everything. He looked at her for a moment. Really looked, Not the glancing inventory of an employer checking that things are in order, but the kind of looking that crosses the formal distances between people and sees something actual. Something human. She held his gaze without flinching, because she meant what she had said, and she was not in the habit of saying things she didn't mean. From down the hall came the sound of small feet on marble and a voice announcing, "Mama, Elefante is hungry," with the urgency of a breaking news alert. The corner of Ethan's mouth moved. Not quite a smile, but the architecture of one. Sophia rose from the chair. "Excuse me," she said, and went to manage the elephant crisis, leaving Ethan on the nursery floor with his son, in the pale yellow light, in the quiet house, with something that might, if it was given time and patience and the sustained willingness to keep showing up, grow into the first real breath he'd taken in 11 weeks. November arrived with the particular ambition of New England Novembers: gray skies, bare trees, the smell of wood smoke from neighboring estates drifting across the lawns. Marisol had never experienced a New England November. In her previous apartment in Bridgeport, the radiator had rattled and the windows had leaked, and the cold was something to barricade against. Here, with the estate's heated floors and thick curtains and grounds that stretched far enough to feel like wilderness, the cold was something different. Something you could actually see. When the first snow came on a Thursday, Marisol pressed her face against the kitchen window and was absolutely undone. "Mama," she breathed. "Mama, the sky is falling in pieces." Sophia was at the kitchen counter, working through Noah's midday routine, and she looked up to see the first real snowfall coating the grounds in white, slow and thick and silent, and she felt the particular melancholy of beautiful things observed in the context of someone else's home, the wistfulness of the borrowed life. "That's snow, baby," she said. "Snow," Marisol repeated. She pressed both hands flat against the glass. "Can we go?" "Later, maybe. Let me finish with Noah." "Can Noah come?" "He's too little for the cold." Marisol considered this seriously. "I will describe it to him," she decided. "So he knows." She went to find Noah in his bouncer in the sitting room, and Sophia listened as Marisol delivered a detailed description of snow to a 3-month-old with the methodical care of a nature documentarian. "It's white," she was saying, "like the little clouds. And it comes down like..." A pause while she searched for the comparison. "Like when you shake the salt, but quiet. And soft. And the grass is wearing it now like a blanket. Because the grass is cold too." Sophia set Noah's bottle down and stood in the doorway and let herself feel the fullness of the moment. Her daughter's extraordinary particular brain, her capacity for tenderness, the way she had transferred all her considerable love so naturally to this baby who had come into their lives needing exactly what Marisol had in abundance. "That's a very good description," said a voice behind her. She turned. Ethan stood in the hallway, his coffee in hand, his eyes on his daughter, on Marisol, with an expression she was learning to identify, the look of a man being ambushed by something beautiful in a way he had stopped expecting and didn't quite know how to defend himself against. "She has a gift for it," Sophia said. "She really does." He moved to stand beside Sophia in the doorway, which was a small thing, and yet represented a measurable shift in the geography of this house. The way the two of them had, over the past weeks, moved incrementally from opposite corners of rooms to doorways shared, conversations that lasted longer than necessity required, a developing ease that had arrived the way all genuine ease arrives, which is slowly and then all at once. He started, stopped. "Does she want to go out? In the snow?" "I could." He seemed uncertain in the way he sometimes was when he was about to say something that revealed wanting rather than logistics. "There are sleds in the garage from a few years ago. I could have someone clear the side lawn." Sophia looked at him. "You could take her," she said. "Yourself." He blinked. "I have calls. They can wait an hour." It was perhaps slightly outside the bounds of what she should say, as an employee, to her employer. She was aware of this. She also did not take it back. Ethan looked at Marisol, who had moved on from describing snow to asking Noah very sincerely whether he preferred it to rain, and was apparently interpreting his expression as a vote for snow. He looked at the grounds through the window, the clean white of them, the stillness. He looked at his coffee. "Okay," he said. What followed was the kind of hour that does not announce its importance while it is happening. Ethan found the old sled in the garage. He found snow boots in 2 different sizes that had never been worn from some long-ago optimistic household purchase, and miraculously one pair was close enough to Marisol's size, padded out with 2 pairs of socks, to function. He bundled her into her own coat and one of Noah's spare blanket wraps for extra warmth and brought her outside while Sophia watched from the kitchen window with Noah in her arms, narrating the expedition to him the way Marisol would have. Through the glass, she watched Ethan set Marisol on the sled at the top of the gentle slope of the side lawn. She watched him crouch beside it, saying something that made Marisol's face flood with excitement and terror in equal measure. She watched him push the sled, gently at first, and then run alongside it as it gathered speed, his long legs eating the snow-covered lawn in loping strides, his voice reaching Sophia even through the glass as something that sounded like laughter, real laughter, unmanaged, surprised out of him by the sight of Marisol's arms thrown wide and her head thrown back and the sound she was making. Pure joy. The sound of pure joy, unedited, released into the November air. They were outside for an hour and 15 minutes. Ethan pulled Marisol up the slope 11 times. He let her bury his hand in snow, and she was gravely delighted by this for reasons known only to her. He crouched down when she told him to, and she put snow very carefully on his shoulder, decorating him with it the way you decorate something important, and he stayed perfectly still while she worked. When they came back inside, his cheeks were red and his hair was dusted white, and Marisol was clinging to his neck with both arms, exhausted and incandescent. "She's asleep," he said softly, coming into the kitchen, and his voice had the hushed quality of someone who has been entrusted with something precious and feels the weight of it. "I'll take her," Sophia said, reaching for Marisol. "I've got her," Ethan said. "Tell me where." Sophia looked at him. This man, this grieving, careful, slowly thawing man, holding her sleeping daughter with the same instinctive care he held a son, and something rearranged itself in her chest, quietly and without drama, the way furniture shifts in a house after an earthquake, and you don't notice until you reach for something in its usual place and find it has moved. "Her room," she said. "I'll show you." She led him down the hallway to the small bright room Marisol had claimed in the suite, with its sunflower drawings taped to the wall and Elefante's throne of honor at the center of the bed, and Ethan laid Marisol down with a gentleness that was not practiced, not performed, but entirely and completely real. He stood up and looked at the sunflower drawings for a moment. "She did these?" he asked quietly. "Last week," Sophia said. "She wanted to decorate." He nodded slowly. He looked at Marisol sleeping. He looked at the drawings. "She deserves a real room," he said. It came out quietly and directly, with the simplicity of a decision rather than a suggestion. Not a suite off the kitchen. A real room, upstairs, with a window that gets the morning light. He paused. "If that's something you would want." Sophia looked at him steadily, with her careful, attending gaze that missed very little. "Why?" she asked. Not defensively, genuinely. He took a moment. "Because she's been making this house remember how to be a home," he said. "And she shouldn't have to do that from a room that feels like an afterthought." The video existed for 11 seconds. Sophia had not meant to take it. She had been filming Marisol doing something elaborate and unauthorized with the kitchen measuring cups, intending to send it to her sister in Chicago, when she had glanced toward the sitting room and her phone had simply continued recording because she couldn't make herself stop. What it showed, Marisol, seated cross-legged on the floor beside Noah's play mat, holding a bottle at precisely the angle Sophia had demonstrated. Like this, see, so the bubbles don't go in. Her small face set with concentration, Noah's eyes fixed on her face with total, trusting absorption. Marisol was talking to him while she fed him, a running commentary in her usual bilingual stream, and Noah's hand had found her knee, his fist curled in the fabric of her leggings, holding on the way he held on to Ethan's finger, with that ancient, instinctive grip that means I know you. You are safe. I am not letting go. Marisol glanced up at the bottle to check the level. She looked back at Noah. She said, in Spanish, the thing her mother said to her every night without exception, Te quiero, chiquito. I love you, little one. Noah smiled. For months old and already smiling, and he smiled at Marisol's voice the way plants turn toward light. Sophia ended the recording then, because her eyes were blurring. She did not mean to leave her phone on the kitchen counter. She had set it down to take Noah from Marisol and get him down for his nap, and when she came back the phone was in Ethan's hands and he was standing at the counter, and he had been watching the 11 seconds of video, she realized, more than once. He looked up when she came in, and she saw his face before he had time to arrange it, and what was on his face was not the carefully managed grief she had grown accustomed to reading, not the controlled, strategic containment of a man keeping himself functional by keeping himself sealed. What was on his face was open, cracked open, broken open, cleanly the way good things break, not into damage but into access, into space, into air. I'm sorry, she said quickly, reaching for the phone. I should put that away. I didn't mean to leave it where. Don't. His hand closed gently around hers. Held it there, brief and startled. The touch of someone who acted before they thought, and then found they didn't want to take it back. He let go, stepped back. The professionalism of the moment reassembling itself around something that had just happened that was not professional. Don't apologize. He looked at the phone. At the paused frame of his son's face, turned up toward Marisol's. I've been watching him with her for weeks. Sophia was still. I didn't say anything because I didn't know what to say, he continued. His voice was careful and rough at the same time, like terrain that is being crossed for the first time. And because it seemed like maybe I was reading into it. The way he is with her. The way he stopped. He pressed his hand flat against the counter the way Marisol pressed her hand against cold glass, grounding himself against a surface. The way she talks to him. The way she told him about the snow. The way she held the bottle like that. She got the angle right. Sophia, she's 3 years old and she held it at the exact right angle and his voice dropped. He just trusted her completely. He's so certain of her. He's never been that certain of me. The last sentence cost him something. She heard the ledge it came from. The high, exposed ledge of a fear he had been carrying since before Noah was born. The fear of not being enough. The fear of being inadequate to the love he was supposed to provide. He's certain of you, Sophia said. Firmly. The way she said things when they were true, and she needed them to be received as true. He knows your hands and your voice and your smell. He calms when you hold him in a way he doesn't calm for me. That's not my imagination, and it's not yours. That's his body knowing his father. Ethan looked at her. The distance between them in the kitchen was the length of a counter, which was also the length of all the distances people maintain out of structure and propriety and the careful management of what is and is not appropriate, and she could feel him standing at the edge of that distance, and not quite crossing it. Marisol told me something, he said. Yesterday. When you were upstairs. She told me. A pause. Something almost shy moving through his expression, which on his face looked startling and unguarded, like sunrise on architecture designed for night. She told me that Noah was going to be her brother. Sophia closed her eyes. I'll talk to her about. I didn't correct her, Ethan said. Sophia opened her eyes. He was looking at her with that direct, unmanaged gaze. The one that came through when he had stopped spending energy on the management of himself, the one she had caught in fragments over the past weeks but never sustained this long. I didn't correct her, he said again, because I was standing there trying to think of what to say and she was looking at me with those eyes, your eyes, and he exhaled. I thought, what if she's not wrong? What if she understands something I've been trying to find my way to, and she just got there faster because she's 3 and she doesn't have He gestured at himself at the walls at the house, all of this in the way.
Ethan, she said.
The first time, she had used his name. Not Mr. Harrington, not avoidance, his actual name, and it changed the air in the kitchen perceptibly, an atmospheric shift, small and decisive. He waited. She thought of what she had told Marisol about friendships. Patient and kind and keep showing up. She thought of the snow day and the 11-second video and Marisol's "He hold me" and all the mornings in the pale yellow nursery light, the gradual careful thaw of a man who had been frozen by loss and was learning, slowly and not without pain, that thawing was possible. That warmth was still possible. That a house could hold grief and still make room for something else. She thought of Rodrigo and what it had cost her to trust again. She thought of Marisol, who trusted completely and immediately and had not yet been talked out of it by experience, and she thought that maybe there was a lesson in that, not naivety, not recklessness, but the choice to give something the possibility of being true before you have proof of it. "I should tell you something," she said. "I came here for the salary. I came here because I needed stability for my daughter, and this position offered it, and I was honest about that in my interview. I want you to know that because I think you deserve to know what the beginning was." He waited. "And I want you to know that the beginning is not the whole story," she said. "Because people change. Situations change. You find yourself in a place you came to for practical reasons, and you discover that it matters to you. That the people in it matter to you."
She paused.
"I don't know what to do with that yet. But I didn't want to pretend I hadn't found it." The kitchen was very quiet. "I buried my wife," he said. "And I genuinely thought the capacity for wanting anything was buried with her. For wanting a life that was more than management and survival." He was quiet for a moment. "Your daughter laughed in this house, and it started coming back. I didn't ask it to. I didn't plan for it. It just," he looked at her. "It started coming back. The counter between them. The length of a distance." "Dinner," he said finally. "If that's something you would consider. Not in the house. Somewhere neutral. Somewhere with a menu and other people where I can ask you questions I want to know the answers to, and you can tell me to stop if I'm overstepping." The corner of Sophia's mouth moved. Not quite a smile, but the architecture of one. "Marisol will want to know where we're going," she said. "Marisol is 3. We tell her we're going to the restaurant with the bread she likes. She'll ask if Noah can come. She always does." And there was the thing she had been watching for, the smile that came through when his defenses were fully down, the one that reached his eyes and changed the whole geography of his face. "I'll have Patricia arrange a sitter." "Mr. Harrington," she said. "Ethan." "Ethan." She tried the name again, wore it for a moment, decided it fit. "The bread restaurant has a 2-hour wait on Fridays." "I own it," he said. And for the first time in 11 weeks, perhaps in longer, Ethan Harrington laughed. Not the almost laugh, not the involuntary fragment of one, but the real thing, surprised out of him completely, filling the kitchen of his enormous cold house with something that sounded almost exactly like warmth. The announcement came on a Tuesday, 6 months after Sophia and Marisol arrived at the Harrington estate, and no one expected it because the things that matter most are almost never the things you see coming. What people expected, what the estate staff whispered about, what Ethan's business partners raised careful eyebrows at, what his attorney of 15 years had gently advised against during a phone call Ethan had listened to politely and then proceeded to ignore, was that the billionaire might eventually, some years from now, after appropriate time had passed and appropriate protocols had been observed, begin seeing someone. Quietly. With suitable discretion. That someone would, logically, be from his world, polished and pedigreed and familiar with the particular register of life at this level of wealth. What no one expected was the foundation. The Camille Harrington Foundation for Families in Crisis was announced on a Tuesday morning with a press release that was uncharacteristically personal for a man whose previous press releases had been models of corporate restraint. It announced an initial endowment of $50 million directed toward emergency housing support, childcare access, and wraparound services for single-parent families experiencing housing insecurity or fleeing domestic violence situations. It announced partnerships with shelters in 7 states. It announced a new pilot program providing stipends to allow parents in crisis to access reliable, certified in-home childcare without foregoing income. The specific gap, the press release noted, that forces so many parents to choose between safety and stability. His attorney called immediately. $50 million, Ethan. Yes. The optics of the timing. I'm aware of the optics. People will say. Robert, Ethan said, with the specific quiet of a man who has made a decision and no longer requires counsel on the decision, only on its execution. She left 6 hours after he was born. She never got to see who he was going to be. She never got to see he stopped. Started again.
She would have wanted this.
She would have built this herself if she'd been given more time. I'm building it for her, with her name on it, and I'm building it because I spent 3 months unable to see outside my own grief, and then a 3-year-old came into my house and fed my infant son and showed me that generosity isn't something that waits for ideal circumstances. It shows up. It shows up and it gives what it has. He paused. So that's what I'm doing. Robert was quiet for a moment. $50 million, he said again. To start, said Ethan. But the foundation was not the thing no one expected. The thing no one expected happened on a Sunday in April, in the backyard of the Harrington estate, with the cherry trees in bloom and Noah, now 6 months old and magnificently opinionated about everything, installed in his little outdoor bouncer under the shade of the largest tree, watching the world with the focused attention of someone cataloging it for future reference. Marisol was nearby, constructing something in the garden bed that she described as a house for worms, which Sophia was choosing to interpret charitably. Ethan had asked Patricia to set the outdoor table. He had asked the kitchen to prepare a specific meal, Sophia's mother's pozole recipe, which he had asked Sophia for under the guise of wanting the kitchen to expand its repertoire and which he had, she later learned, been learning to make himself for 3 weeks with the grim methodical focus he brought to all projects he intended not to fail at. He had asked Sophia's sister to come from Chicago. He had arranged the travel without telling Sophia. He had told Marisol, who had kept the secret for 4 entire days through what Sophia could only imagine was a heroic act of self-restraint, because Marisol's relationship with secrets was generally brief and turbulent. When Sophia's sister Angela walked through the garden gate and Sophia made the sound she made, the soft, broken sound of someone receiving something they had stopped hoping for, Ethan was watching from across the yard with Noah in his arms and Marisol at his side, and Marisol looked up at him and said, "She's happy crying, right?" And Ethan said, "Yes," and Marisol said, "Good. I like happy crying." And Ethan looked down at this small, extraordinary person and thought, with the clarity that only comes from having been very lost and finding your way back, I would do anything for you. Both of you. I would rearrange the whole architecture of my life. He did not propose at the table, though the ring had been in his study for 3 weeks. He was not a man who moved without preparation, and he had prepared something that was not a speech, not a performance, but a simple collection of true things that he intended to say to Sophia when it was quiet and Marisol was asleep and Noah was settled, and there was nothing performative about the moment, just 2 people who had arrived at the same place by very different roads, recognizing each other across the remaining distance. What he said, when that moment came, in the kitchen where everything had started and everything had shifted, was this: I spent 6 months watching you take care of everyone in this house without once asking for anything for yourself. I watched you take care of my son like he was your own and take care of me, and you did take care of me, Sophia, even when I made it very difficult, even when I gave you nothing to work with, and I watched your daughter teach this house what warmth felt like when it had forgotten. And I have been trying very carefully not to mistake gratitude for what this is, to make sure I knew the difference. He paused. I know the difference. Sophia was very still. I love you, he said. I love Marisol. I love the family that has that has quietly, without asking my permission, assembled itself in this house over the past 6 months. And I want to make it official in every way that can be made official, if that's something you want. Not because it's practical and not because it solves anything. Because it's true. Because you're true, and I want a life that matches. Marisol, who was supposed to be asleep, appeared in the kitchen doorway in her pajamas with Elefante under one arm, surveyed the situation with expert eyes, and announced, "Are you getting married?" Sophia covered her face with her hands. Ethan laughed. "That's the plan," Ethan told her. Marisol considered this for a long moment. "Noah will be my brother," she said. "For real?" "For real," Ethan confirmed. She studied him with those careful, attending eyes, her mother's eyes, for another moment. Then she walked across the kitchen to him and leaned her head against his arm, in the unself-conscious, boneless way of a child who has decided that someone is safe, and she said, "Okay, that's good." And then, because she was Marisol and she had priorities, "Can I have water?" Ethan looked at Sophia over the top of her daughter's head. Sophia was laughing through something that was not quite only laughter. He thought of the morning he had stood in the shadow of his study doorway watching a 3-year-old tell his son that the strange animal in the book was a dog. He thought of 4 minutes of standing still. He thought of what had quietly, persistently, stubbornly assembled itself in the cold house that had forgotten how to breathe. "Yeah," he said softly to all of it, to the question behind all the questions.
"Yeah,
that's good." He got Marisol her water, and in the nursery down the hall, in the pale yellow glow, Noah slept in a house that was finally, fully, warmly home. Some houses are built with marble and money. The best ones are built with something else entirely, with the quiet faithfulness of showing up, the extravagant generosity of a 3-year-old, and the particular courage of people who have been broken and choose, anyway, to stay open.